I'm Jim Check. You're watching Now Media. I'm here with John Carpay from the Justice Center of Constitutional Freedoms. I think this is the third time here. You're a regular now, which is great. But you guys put a lot of time and a lot of effort into this post-COVID report, right? Post-COVID Canada, the rise in unexpected deaths. I read through it. Holy cow, lots of charts and graphs and stuff like that. Lots of work. What was kind of like what do you think the big nugget in there is?
I'll mention three. The one that blew me away the most was that, according to Statistics Canada, COVID levels, the number of COVID deaths went up after 80% of Canadians got injected with COVID vaccine. So in 2020, in the first year of the virus, Statistics Canada reports 16,000 COVID deaths, which of course is a very small number. Of the total deaths are like 300,000 per year, right? The COVID did not change the fact that the leading killers in Canada were heart disease, lung disease, stroke, cancer. That didn't change. Anyway, you get 16,000 COVID deaths according to Statistics Canada. That jumps up to 20,000 in 2022 after 80% of the population, including like 90-something% of the seniors over 70, after millions and millions of Canadians get injected, the number of COVID deaths actually goes up. That was one thing that was interesting. The other big one is...
I just want to stop you for 1 second here, and I just want to make sure everybody knows this data is from Stats Canada. This is not John Carpay's data. This is from Stats Canada, and this is a report that you can find on the Justice Center website there. And you can download this report. It's a pretty big report, lots of pages, but it's Stats Canada data. It's not your data. And before anybody loses my, because a couple of years ago we couldn't even talk about this stuff, but I just wanted to make sure that people were clear on that. This is Stats Canada data.
Absolutely, yeah. The other big item is that deaths in Canada reached an all-time high in 2022. 337,000 Canadians died. That's a big jump over COVID's first year. We got 307,000 Canadians dying. After everybody gets injected, the death rate in Canada, overall death rate, goes up significantly by 9% over 2 years, which is a lot more of a rapid increase. The third one is quite similar and even more shocking, is that amongst younger Canadians under the age of 45, so from birth to age 44, death rates amongst younger Canadians are up 36%, more than a third. These are people who are not dying of COVID. The under 45s in the COVID years, it was about 1%. According to Statistics Canada, it was 1% of younger Canadians were dying of COVID. 99% of younger Canadians are dying from causes other than COVID. And yet this death rate amongst younger Canadians is up after vaccines and lockdowns. So we see this over and over again, increases in drug overdose deaths, increases in alcohol-induced deaths, significant rise in the rate of young children dying. All of this death is taking place after lockdowns, after vaccine passports, and they're not COVID deaths. There were COVID deaths, they were real, they did happen, but we've got these overall rising death rates in Canada after the vaccine. And that's interesting, and it begs the question.
Yeah, and we did a story the other day. It was actually Holly Dolan's Blacklock story that we reported on. In that, the government had set up like a VAERS, a reporting center, and they set up a department and all that stuff and funded it. And turns out most of the time they were just watching Netflix and having parties and stuff like that, and then denying claims. And hopefully they're going to clean that up a bit. But I don't know if you saw that story or not from Blacklocks, but it's kind of a mess for sure. And then there's a lot of reported vaccine adverse effects, but a lot of them didn't make it, or they were, like basically trying to deny them, making it hard to file claims, all kinds of stuff, right? Just a lot of foot dragging, but lots of time to party.
Well, our new report that's on our website addresses that issue as well. And what happened in 2020 was that the World Health Organization created a brand new cause of death classification protocol, April of 2020. And under the new protocol, if you were terminally ill with cancer, and then if they did a PCR test on you, which does not diagnose COVID, but if they did a PCR test on you before or after you died, and you tested positive for COVID on a PCR test, you'd be listed as a COVID death, even though you were terminally ill with cancer. That's a radical departure from the way it used to be in years prior to 2020. If you were terminally ill with cancer, but you got a really bad flu and the bad flu pushed you over the edge, your death would be recorded in the statistics as a cancer death, not a flu death. And so this was a big change. And the World Health Organization protocol said that COVID should be listed as cause of death. If it was assumed to be, or if it was a possible cause, they cast the net very, very wide. And then you combine that with the PCR testing, which does not reliably diagnose COVID. The positive test depends on how many cycles you run that test at. So governments in Canada, the provincial governments and federally, and countries all around the world, we're coming up with these really high COVID death numbers. And at the same time, for a vaccine death, it's very, very tight. The way that you have to prove, not beyond a reasonable doubt, but there's a very high standard of proof that you show that, the only way that you could explain this death is because of the vaccine. And so it's a completely different approach, right? So you've got this very broad, cast the net wide approach for classifying COVID deaths, and classifying vaccine deaths is a very, very uphill climb. And so you've got a glaring double standard in how the governments are approaching those two causes of death.
Yeah, and some of that, the pharmacy, that lobby group is one of the biggest in the world, and definitely in the United States and in Canada, that lobby group for big pharma. Obviously, they contribute lots, they advertise lots on media, they have paid lobbyists. Do you think that's a big factor in how that works?
Well, there's truth to the old saying, follow the money. People are motivated by money as well as other things, right? Money's not the only thing that motivates us. People love their families, or they care about their prestige or their life enjoyment or their reputation or, their spiritual growth. So money is not the only thing that motivates people. However, money is a very big motivator. You look at we did not get into this in the report, but the very vociferous, aggressive attack against ivermectin, saying it was a horse paste that no human would ever take, even though it was invented for humans in the 1970s, and billions of doses have been taken very safely. And what the governments did is, rather than refute the reports showing that ivermectin can be effective against COVID, rather than refuting and getting into a debate and explaining why those studies ostensibly are unreliable, what the governments did is they said, there is no evidence, right? There's no evidence showing that ivermectin can help against COVID, which is false. There is evidence out there, and the government refused to get into a debate. Now, this is a cheap drug. The patents have expired. It's pretty easy to produce. And if a lot of people had taken ivermectin, if we had more data to confirm it being effective, that would have really hurt big pharma financially. So that's for sure.
Yeah, so this is the Holly Doan Blacklock story here. This is managers of the federal COVID vaccine compensation fund are concealing the number of injury and death claims paid at taxpayers' expense. And that's from the 2021 Privy Council memo that urged staff to downplay vaccine-related impacts. And that vaccine injury support program had updated claim figures every 6 months since its launch in 2021. Managers for the first time skipped a deadline to update stats on June 1st. No reason given. Managers did not reply to questions. And then it goes on and talks about how, like suppressing of claims, and that the last program item on December 1st indicated over 3,000 claims were received to date, including injuries and deaths. A total of 219 were approved for payouts, totaling about $16 million. And concealment of updated figures followed a 2021 access to information memo in the Privy Council secretly recommended authorities downplay vaccine-related deaths and injuries. This is right from them, right? And again, stats, memos, all these types of things, and then and it's still being kind of protected here, right? Like, I mean, in the United States, they're exposing a lot more of the COVID mistakes, like they're kind of examining it. But we're still really, I mean, you're doing this work. It shouldn't be you doing this work, but you're doing this work when it should be, healthcare doing this work.
Well, the government's failed Canadians by violating the Constitution, by not doing a proper cost-benefit analysis. That's actually what, to me, was a red flag when they came out with the 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And initially, they didn't say we're going to try to stop the spread of the virus, because we all knew that that's futile. You can't stop a virus from spreading. But they said, well, we got 2 weeks to flatten the curve so that we're not going to have these horribly overcrowded hospitals. And so there was some logic to that. Where I stopped supporting the government's agenda on lockdowns is when it became abundantly clear early on that they were not making any serious effort to do a proper cost-benefit analysis. They did not have a spirit of humility that would say, look, we've never locked down all of society for months on end. We've never done this before in human history. It's never been tried. So it's an experiment. Because it's an experiment, we're going to carefully measure all of the positive and negative impacts, and we're going to weigh the two, and we're going to see how this experiment's going. That would have been a scientific approach to look at the positive and negative outcomes of a particular experiment. But what they did instead is they said, we're on the right track. Anybody who disagrees with us is anti-science, or they don't care about people dying, or both. They don't care about people dying and they're anti-science. And we're absolutely correct. And we're not going to look at any lockdown harms. Right. So the Justice Center is previously, we are doing the work, just as you said, we're doing work that ought to have been done by governments, where you look at the lockdown harms and not just be, thumping your chest every day about how great the benefits are.
Well, if you look into the United States right now, some of the, I guess the red states are doing some of that work. And you can see the pushback they're getting from, the legacy media and some of the, like the lobbyists for big pharma, like they're pulling out those old things. And I'm just going to read you this last bit here in this memo from Privy Council. The memo suggests authorities use various messaging strategies like skewing statistics. Gotta like that, right? Skewing statistics, or making reassuring statements such as the chance of it happening to me is 1 in a million. The memo recommends that managers identify winning communication strategies to maximize public confidence in the government's COVID regulatory regime.
Wow.
Marketing. It's basically marketing, right? And marketing through, and if we can remember Justin Trudeau, right? You won't ride on a plane, you won't ride on a bus. And then he pulled out all the ists, you're misogynist, racist, homophobic, and all these things, fringe people, just basic bullying. And then, after it was over, he said, I never said any of those things.
Well, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. So I think we've got today in 2025, there are, I believe, more Canadians who are awake and aware and alert than what was the case in 2019. So it's important to just keep on speaking truth to power, and to keep on having these discussions, or trying to have them with others who are willing to have them. And, in the long run, truth will vanquish the lie. The problem is, the good thing is truth has endurance, but lies have speed, right? So a lie will make its way halfway around the world, and truth is still getting out of bed and trying to put its shoes and pants on, right? The lie has speed, but the truth has endurance. And so the truth about the vaccine, through studies like like the Justice Center's recent study, the truth will come out. It just takes longer than what we might want.
Yeah, my big point though is like you're doing this work, and we only get better by examining our performance. No matter you're talking about sports or business or anything, we examine our performance through crisis. And in Canada right now, we're still reluctant to examine our performance. And what we have, usually you get that when you get a change in government. And we didn't get a change in government. So basically almost across Canada, it's the same government that it's there. They don't want to examine their own performance for I guess, for that matter. Whereas you look in the States, there has been a change in government. And some of those people are starting to look at the performance and say, what happened and how can we do better? Whereas in Canada, we still have a lot of reluctance in looking at it. And here it is, a Justice Center looking at it. And how many major outlets are calling you right now talking about this report?
I've got, so far this week, I've got a half dozen or more media interviews scheduled. To answer your question specifically, they are almost all of them, I think, are with independent media.
No.
So
I could have answered it for you first, right? I could have answered it for you first, right?
We're not getting
CBC is not going to interview you, right? They're definitely not going to give you 15, 20 minutes, are they? They might give you
not
so
on
they
this
can pull
issue.
They're going to pull a clip from you where they make you say something, and then they're going to tell you, oh, there you go. Discredit you at some point, and then say, there you go. But they'll have to discredit Stats Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's I get that during the time they have that excuse. At the time, nobody knew what to do, and they're all call it following the leader, and they're unsure. But there is no reason not to be critical of the performance, so that we make sure we don't do it again.
Well, you and other independent media are getting the word out, and there are fewer and fewer Canadians tuning into the CBC. Their listening numbers and viewership numbers are slowly declining. And you've got independent media like the Rebel, Juno News, the Epoch Times, the Western Standard, Kelowna Now. All these places have a growing audience, and so it's during the lockdown years, the government-funded media, right, which is not just the CBC but also Global News and all of it. The government-funded media boycotted the Justice Center almost entirely. They never wrote, you wouldn't see the Justice Center in the news amongst the government-funded, and yet our supporter base tripled during lockdowns of vaccine passports. Why? Well, because there's all these people are getting the news from independent media. And so we got the word out very successful to millions of people without the CBC or CTV or Global, getting our message out to people.
The big problem with accountability in Canada is like the national media, there's lots of independents out there. We're all gaining audience. But the national media is CBC's almost fully funded. Their salaries are almost fully funded by the government. But the other media, half their salaries are almost funded by the government, and that's the Global and the CTVs and the Globe and Mail and all that stuff. So I mean, they're influenced heavily, and not funded by the government, I should say, funded by the Liberal government, because the Conservatives said they would defund them. So obviously, when during the election they had like a stake in that race, they could end up losing their jobs. So especially the CBC, when they're talking about $1.5 billion, and they got a raise, and the platform was, if Poilievre wins, he defunds them. If Carney wins, they get a raise, and they got their raise. And what did the CBC executives do? They gave themselves a raise, like they did a good job winning the election, but nothing for the reporters, but just to kind of set the stage. And in the United States, people complain about Fox News, but they at least have Fox and CNN, and Like they have some counter arguments at least.
They also have their independence, right? Like Tucker Carlson got fired by Fox.
Joe Rogan, all kinds of. Joe Rogan probably has a bigger audience than most of the legacy media combined. Yeah, so I mean there is alternatives in the United States for sure. Whereas Canada, there's a few of us upstarts right now, but very tough. As why you don't get, even if they get you on to discredit you, why not, right? But they just pretend you don't exist.
Yeah, well, like I said, we're gaining traction, we're making headway. even in 2025, with the work that the Justice Centre has done on the prorogation of Parliament case and our other cases, our involvement with the Chris Barber, Tamara Leach criminal trial, on and on and on. All this work, we are getting new donors all the time. Every day, there's people that have going onto our website and they're donating. Whether it's $1,000 or $100 or $10 or whatever it is, and they're getting an official tax receipt. So, things might get worse before they get better. But there's a growing number of Canadians who are awake and aware, and I find that encouraging.
You have a couple of big cases coming up, and the Tamara Leach and Chris Barber one. That's September 13th by September?
I think that's October the 7th is when the verdict is going to be reached. I don't know if the judge knew when she set that date. That happens to be the anniversary of the Hamas massacre of Israeli civilians, was on October the 7th. Same day for the release of the sentencing for Chris Barber and Tamara Leach, who've both been found guilty of the minor crime of mischief. But yeah, coming up October 7th.
Noise violations and parking violations.
Well, yeah. The law is not, sure, right? It's not being enforced fairly. I mean, we had Aboriginal protesters in Winnipeg in July of 2021 protesting against residential schools, and they vandalized and tore down a large statue of Queen Victoria, which is a criminal offense, because it's a criminal offense to destroy public property or to destroy another person's property. And police stood by and watched, and the Manitoba Crown Prosecutor's Office announced that nobody would be prosecuted. And so here you have an example. If you're, the right person, right, kind of using that in brackets, the right person arguing for the right cause, well, then you're not going to get prosecuted. But here you've got Tamara Leach and Chris Barber are protesting for the wrong cause, right? A cause that the establishment doesn't like. And so you see huge amounts of resources being put towards prosecuting Tamara Leach and Chris Barber.
Yeah, we played a clip this morning on our really big show. We do a 1-hour newscast every weekday morning at 9 a.m. And in that clip, we played the police there talking about how they will hunt you down to the ends of earth, even if it takes months, if you contributed and donated to this trucker convoy. But, you can definitely break into somebody's home and all that stuff in Canada and, be released that morning. So, I mean, it's quite the difference, right? So let's pull up your website here. We're going to pull it up here so that people see that, and then you can go there and you can get this report yourself if you go up to the top there. I think if you go on the home page there, maybe you can tell us where we can find this. Education. You go to education, click the education tab there.
There's a top tab there. Go back to it, to education. You've got reports. Scroll down to reports. And there you go, post-COVID Canada, the rise in unexpected deaths.
Click the read the report button, and you can download that and read it at your leisure. And, the work that the Justice Centre is doing. And then there's a place to donate on that website as well if you like the work that's being done. We've covered quite a few of your stories. You're representing Jeff Evely as well, the young man there, the veteran that walked in the force and got a $28,000 fine. Amy Ham, and I interviewed Lisa Bildy, her lawyer. I think you guys are covering the legal fees for that one. Lots going on with the Justice Centre, for sure. Anything else you guys got going on?
Well, there's so many cases on our website. I don't know which one. We are providing lawyers, as you mentioned, for Jeff Evely to challenge this absurd, irrational, utterly unscientific ban that says that walking through the woods in Nova Scotia is going to cause a forest fire. I mean, if the government was banning campfires, banning smoking cigarettes, banning cooking, we would be behind that 100% because there's a rational connection, right? If you
makes sense.
Smoking cigarettes, having a campfire, you can put a ban on that to prevent forest fires. But to say that you can't walk in the woods is just it's just outrageous. So the other court application that is coming up this week is the Justice Centre's in court to argue for the medical privacy, because Nova Scotia seems to be a bad province for rights and freedoms. Nova Scotia has passed a law that will give politicians and bureaucrats access to the private medical records of patients. And so we are challenging that law in court. The College of Physicians and Surgeons of Nova Scotia initially was against the law, and then for whatever strange reason, they flipped and they said, oh, we're not going to worry about it. We'll just trust the government. We're sure that the government would never do this. And so now you got the Justice Centre in court saying, well, you know, the law enables and authorizes the government to do this, and that's a bad law, right? You don't pass a bad law and then just hope that the politicians and the bureaucrats will never look at the individual medical records of patients. So that's a case in Nova Scotia that we're arguing this week.
Let's get back to this report here. There's an executive summary that you'll find in there. It's about the 4th page in, and you can read that. And then in there, there's a lot of data that supports that executive summary. What do you hope that people get from this? Like, what is your, like, you know, like if you had, you know, like if somebody read that, what do you hope they get out of it?
Well, I mean, the goal is to generate and stimulate public discussion. And I think that will happen, maybe not as much as I would like it to, but it's going to happen to some extent, because if you disagree with the report, you have to go into the Stats Canada and do your homework, do your research, and then produce an alternative report that, you know, would supposedly show that our report is flawed or misleading. But we're using the Stats Canada data, so it makes it harder to dismiss. But I think in one sentence, the takeaway from the report is that after lockdowns and vaccine mandates were imposed, you see higher deaths. You see more COVID deaths. You see more deaths overall, generally. You see especially more deaths amongst Canadians under 45 who were not dying of COVID. You see more deaths from alcohol-induced deaths, more deaths from drug overdoses, higher death rates amongst children. All of these higher death rates are there after lockdowns and mandatory vaccination policies or vaccine passports. After those policies are introduced, you see the deaths go up. And the big question is why? And is that correlation, which is pretty obviously there, is the correlation also causation? That's the big question that needs to be researched.
Yeah, I know lots of people have answered all of that. I mean, data or your stories that they come up with. And I know myself too, I've been doing HR for a long time, and for some very large companies with 150 staff and that. And I can tell you that I've never seen so many young people have so many medical complications as I have, you know, in this past little while. That's the thing that I can come away with. But I can't prove it with stats. You know, it's just like, you know, it's just you're just kind of like replaying what you've experienced in the past couple of years versus, you know, I'm getting older, your past 40 years, you know, working in business and that. And I've never seen so many complications for people, especially among the young people.
Yeah, there's way more young people getting cancer today than 4 years ago. It did happen, you know, occasionally, on rare occasions. There have been people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who get cancer, but it was pretty rare. Yeah. And now this is not in our report, but I've heard this anecdotally from different sources, from people in the know, that you've got young people getting cancer far more frequently than 4 years ago before the vaccine. So it warrants exploration.
Yeah, I know there's lots of other
investigation.
Causal factors too, and it's what we eat and stuff like that too. You know, the fast food diets and all these things, and maybe lockdown, the mental fitness. You know, like because that suffered a lot. I think you did another report as well that talks about, you know, the mental impact of lockdowns, right? And I think that's a big one as well, especially depriving children of that interaction at a young age. And, you know, some of them have been set back dramatically.
Well, our lockdown harms report is also on the website. It's the one prior to this one. Okay, so this one really delves into the Stats Canada data And but the previous one is about lockdown harms, and that too, it's government data that demonstrates the lockdown harms.
And I think that one is so much easier to see in people, like the lockdown harms, just in there's and the way that they interact in society and stuff like that too. And some of them don't want to go outside, still are really affected by it and still scared and don't want to go to work. We're seeing the pushback right now, even in the federal government and, by provincial governments trying to push their workers back to the workplace, right? And, they still say they're scared to go to work and stuff like that. So, I don't know. You do great work, and I think people should go to the website, and you also follow you on Twitter as well, and you can see that stuff. And I always thank you for your time to come on here. I'm sure we'll talk to you many, many times after this. But anything else you want to share before we call this?
Thanks for having me on your show, and thanks for paying some attention to this report. And I do encourage people, go online, read the report. If you don't want to read the whole thing, there's a good executive summary, and share it with people. And it's kind of a new opportunity to reignite some discussions and say, here is a report chock full of Statistics Canada data. What do you think? And put it out there for discussion.
I had a good friend, a minister with the BC government, and she said to me, once she's passed away now, but she said to me, Jim, if you see a problem, get a flashlight, get the strongest flashlight you can and shine a light on it.
Yeah.
And, that's what you're doing right here, shining a light on. And that's what we need to do, and that's what BD's job is too, is shine a light on it, right? So, and we thank you for bringing that to the attention of the public. And until next time, thank you for watching Now Media.
Have a great rest of the day.
We don't just report the news, we live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.